What is going on, Clippers fans? Welcome to Season 2, Episode 12 of Clips and Dip, part of the 213 Hoops Empire. You can find us everywhere you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. I am joined today by the usual trio of hosts. We have Adam Oslin, Will Updike, who was not here last week. How are you fellas doing? Media Days in the books. We're going to talk all about that and pretty much nothing else. Adam, how are you, buddy?
Just glad the Zodiac Killer is likely dead at this point.
Sure.
Whoever
Will,
it was.
are you on the same level as Adam?
Yes. I am glad. I am glad that we have some sort of closure there, even if we don't have an identity. It's very important to remember on this day, media day of all days.
Speaking of closure and maybe not having an identity, let's talk some of the Clippers Media Day quotes. One of the things I want to bring up first that I think Clippers fans were mostly excited about, we're going to talk what we like, what we didn't like. Ty Lue saying Robert Covington should have played more and that it was his fault that he didn't play as much. How do we feel about that quote? Will, Adam, you were at Media Day. Were you rubbing elbows with everybody? What happened?
Yeah, I didn't ask
home
that.
State? Did they have home state catering?
They had, I don't know, home state. They had Chick-fil-A. They had an assortment of all the Chick-fil-A sauces you could ask for. You want a spicy Chick-fil-A? You want the original Chick-fil-A? You want a biscuit? They had
sauce is the best part.
A good spread there. Yeah, I like the Polynesian sauce, I think is the one.
Yep.
I can get down on that.
Like my arteries always. But no, that was an interesting answer from Coach Lue, but I don't think it's the first time that he's at least alluded to doing a better job with rotations.
Rocco specifically.
Just making sure. Yeah, this was the first time I think he said something specifically about Rocco.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that he's taken ownership and accountability for multiple times in the past. But I'm sure much of Clipper Nation, this was red meat for them. They loved hearing that.
Oh, of course. I don't know. Do we think this was also my next note on it? Will, do you think this will translate to more playing time for Robert Covington? Does this actually mean anything?
Yeah, I'm really unclear on that. I think my first initial reaction was kind of cynicism to that quote. Like, so what does that mean? Like he'll at least be guaranteed non-DNPs, or like what exactly does that look like? I don't know. It's interesting because you're not going to get your answer at Media Day. Likely not even through reading the tea leaves at training camp. But, as we've discussed on here, there's a major question mark at the 4 and who's going to be starting there and what the future of that is going to look like. And I'm hoping that this is an indication from Ty Lue in terms of how he's looking at rotations, at addressing that hole and addressing that problem. So I'm kind of split 50-50 on it, but I'm going to go ahead and choose to be optimistic and say, he does realize that there's an issue. I'm hoping that it's apparent at this point that, what happened with Morris, and I don't have any personal vendetta against the guy or anything, but what happened with Morris and sort of the defensive woes and the shooting inefficiencies might not have just been a flash in the pan. I'm going to go as far as to say probably weren't just a flash in the pan.
Sure.
And I'm going to go ahead and take this quote to mean that Ty Lue feels the same way. And perhaps we are closer to getting to a more acceptable answer at that position, barring any sort of roster upgrades, which at this point is seeming more and more unlikely.
Well, Marcus Morris was there, but he didn't go up to the podium, as did a handful of Clippers players. I kind of tried to. Bones didn't as well. Kobe Brown, Jordan Miller. I tried to dig a little bit deeper on that question, a little bit indirectly, by asking him about KJ Martin and what position he sees him playing. I talked about the 3 or the 4. He played the 4 more a couple of years ago. And Coach Lue immediately said, I asked him, what do you see him as? He says, I see him as a basketball player. But then he elaborated and said he played some small ball 5 with the Rockets. So if he's open to him playing all these different positions, including the small ball 5, then I think he could play the 4. Like, if he could play the 5, for everyone wondering, like, is he really a 4? Is he just a 3? Is he not big enough to play the 4? If Coach Lue is interested, or at least creative enough to maybe have him at the 5 at times, then the 4 is definitely a possibility.
You mentioned
I just see a lot of that being limited by how often he's going to share the floor with Russell Westbrook, to be perfectly honest. I think not two non-shooters out there, guys who like to operate in the mid-range. That just feels like a spacing nightmare to me.
Speaking of Terrence and KJ, who do kind of, I like, Ty Lue said he's like the 3, 4, and the 5. That's how he talks about Terrence too, right? He called Terrence like the 6 last year or some weird thing. He kind of teased that Terrence might start. I think it was Joey Lynn who asked him, like, does it make sense to have Terrence starting with Russ or something a little more not as blunt as that? And
he
Ty
told
Lue,
Joey, "You're smart." He said, "You're smart."
Okay.
No, but I think he knew Joey was picking up on something. That's kind of what he was getting at there.
Right, which I hope happens because I think Law Murray pointed it out. When you have Terrence kind of operating in space, if we're going to post Zoo up more, which is also something Ty Lue said, Terrence can just run around and do his chaos thing. He can cut, he can slash, he can do all this stuff. So I think the Terrence man starting agenda that Adam, you are very hyped on since we still have Russ, that feels like it might happen. It really feels like the 4 position is up for grabs right now in the starting lineup.
I mean, then we're talking about Kawhi and Paul George moving up a position, right? If Terrence Mann is in the starting backcourt,
maybe
next to Russell Westbrook,
maybe, I don't know. This team might be weird and just run him at the 4, right? Like offensively, I could see it not switching.
Running
I don't know if
Terrence
that's
at the
good
4?
or bad. Yeah, run Terrence.
I would much rather have Kawhi at the 4.
I was mocked when I talked
fair.
about Terrence at the 4 on our last show. So that can't be, guys. How could he play the 4?
Wait, did I mock you?
No, you weren't here.
Will mocked me from afar. He heard that somehow.
Yeah, I probably mocked you for that, but now that Ty Lue has said it, I believe Ty Lue over you.
Fair
Is
enough.
that not fair?
I also said that, or I asked Nicholas Batum, because we've talked about whether or not he's comfortable starting or wants to start. I asked him straight up, do you feel better? Are you competing, I should say? I asked him, are you competing for the starting 4 spot? Do you feel more comfortable coming off the bench? And he didn't defer and say something like, well, Marcus is our starting 4. He said, you know me, I'll do whatever they ask me to do. If that start, then I'll do that. I just want to help this team win. But it was a long, lengthy answer, and it was very thoughtful, as you would expect from Nicholas Batum.
That's a good call. Will, how are you feeling about the Zubats thing? Because I think a lot of people, he talked about wanting to get Zoo the ball more, and then also maybe not doing drop coverage on pick and rolls, which if you hate Zubats, you probably hate the drop coverage because you don't think it works.
I feel like it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint. I love Big Zoo. I've never been super vocal about. Actually, that's a lie. I have at times been vocal about getting when we can get the offense going by feeding the big man a couple of times, keeping him engaged on the other side. I think that's great if it's open. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be a game plan. Like we all remember the first bucket used to be for Marcus Morris 2 seasons ago. I don't know if it needs to go that far with it where it feels like a part of the script, but
6th bucket always.
I think just keeping in people's heads that Zoo is as efficient, and by people's heads I mean the team, the roster, keeping in people's heads that Zoo is efficient, that is an option, that you should feel comfortable being able to go to him in some of those things. I think that's great. I can't handicap or put like a percentage of what I think his post-up possessions would increase by.
Right.
But I also, my thing with the drop is I know that he gets dragged about this, but so where do you want Zoo when he's on an island against a guard?
Right up in there. I want to it's right up in there. No, I don't know. It will be
dropping again.
What?
No, I was going to say he wasn't dropping against Luka Doncic in the playoffs. He'd play up on him, play really well, put a hand in his face, and it just wouldn't even matter.
Yeah.
But I think that's what Will's saying. Like, that's his job. He's doing his job correctly right there. I think the people who are mad at Zoo about his defense are just always going to be mad about it. I think he could play hovering defense.
Who do you like in the Pacific Division? What center defensively do you like better than Zubats in the Pacific Division?
They should check out the Clippers' defensive rating without him.
I'm trying to think.
Not good.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's better than Nurk, who's now in the position.
Or yeah,
well, obviously Anthony Davis is the best.
Yeah, like outside of Anthony Davis, like who in the Western Conference do you think is better? And Anthony Davis barely counts because he doesn't play the 5.
Right. I can't think. I mean, I guess Sabonis.
Defensively?
I'm trying to think of somebody.
Are you insane?
Sabonis gets cooked on that end often.
You think Sabonis is better than Zubats defensively?
I was throwing it out there for fuck's sake. Who do you think's better? Nobody, right? Like AD.
AD.
Like it's AD and then it's I mean, that's fair. Yeah, there's not a lot.
I mean, Steven Adams, kind of. I don't know. Sure. I wouldn't want Steven Adams at his age, which he's actually never as old as you think he is. He's just been in the league forever. I would not want him to have to get into as many of the mobile positions as Zoo does defensively.
Yeah,
he's much better than Jusuf Nurkic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we like Terrence starting potentially. Russ said they're going to run a lot, which if Terrence isn't starting, I hope KJ is, because who else is going to run with Russ? And that's
he kind of had like a wry smile on his face when he said it too. Oh, we're going to run. Like, I'm still fast. I could still jump high. He said he thinks he's still an elite player. And yeah, we're going to run. So team's going to have to be in really good shape. But that also speaks to who's playing the 4 then, who's running with him. I mean, it looked like if you just go back to the Sacramento game where they scored 175 points or whatever it was, it wasn't difficult for Kawhi and Paul George all of a sudden to keep up with someone like Russ when they brought him in game 1. Their offense was humming in that game, obviously, and they were fine getting up and down the court. So
has that ever really been an issue though? Like, I know the Clippers tend to play at a slower pace. 2 seasons ago, best half-court offense in the league. Or I guess that's 3 seasons ago now. They were really, really good. The last time Kawhi and Paul George were both healthy, I'll put it that way. Really, really good half-court offense. I don't think it's ever been like an issue where, or at least from my perspective, where they couldn't get up and down the floor. I just think it's the combination of both having to initiate and somehow being like, a fast break. Like
everything,
like you having to personally instigate the fast break, like as a ball handler, that to me I see as an issue. But like with a ball handler who's looking to push the pace like that, I mean, they are both getting older, injuries, blah 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 blah. But I've never thought that could be a limiting factor. What about you guys?
They're coming in 100%, and I think that point you made about like a point guard who's actually going to push the pace. As opposed to like find the outlet pass, we love it. But Russ will actually dribble. Rondo wasn't doing that and things like that. John Wall tried, I guess. Russ is a one-man fast break at times. And I think you're right. I think they can actually, PG doesn't have to be the one dribbling up on the fast break, which I don't think any of us really want to see with his ball security.
And I'm not saying they're going to be like the fastest like team in the league or anything.
Oh God,
like
that would be hilarious.
Like I don't think they're going to have that kind of a turnaround. But I've never thought that like physically Kawhi or Paul George are a limiting factor in the pace of this team. I do think there have been issues in who's initiating the offense. Not pointing fingers, but I mean, like if they have to do that plus play, on both ends of the ball, I do understand why it makes sense that this is a slower team.
Yeah.
Well, you got to build in some rest at some point.
Right.
They're also running to the wings. They're running to the 3-point line and starting there typically. And this Clippers team, all the numbers would say that when they get a shot off in the first 10 seconds of the shot clock, their field goal percentage goes way up. But another way Big Zoo could get some of those post touches, because he could run and beat his man down the floor, is running a little bit with Russ and him finding him down low for a quick, easy 2 here and there.
I want to see, there's going to be some great montages of Zoo putting his head down and going into a dead sprint when Russ picks up.
He needs to start doing the Naruto run.
Dude, just do it.
Well, it's because Russ often wants to get the rebound and get out and run that way and lead the break. So you're going to be ahead of him knowing he's getting that rebound, So he could push it up ahead and have that outlet pass at times to Zoo, who's just boxing out his man down low on the other side.
There was some exciting stuff to take. I know this was like kind of a boring media day, but that's kind of what you want if you're a fan of a team on media day. But there's some exciting stuff lineup-wise with what Ty was talking about. Like there's a lot of good stuff. Like this Russ talk about being fast, Terrence seemingly feeling like he's going to start or something like that. But I was more hyped than I thought I was going to be after seeing some of these quotes. Kawhi hates the new rules, which was sweet. All of those clips were amazing. If you missed it, Kawhi asked what the new rest rule is, and then rightfully so was like, if they're trying to do this for what I did in Toronto, I was hurt the whole time. Like it's as far.
He had a quad injury.
Absolutely.
And he played hurt throughout their playoff run. For anyone who ever questions whether or not Kawhi Leonard loves the game or something, which I think is absurd, he was noticeably limping, especially in the Eastern Conference Finals against Giannis and the Bucks. When he had that dunk on Giannis, he was limping around, and he just played through it because he could. And all the reports said he wanted to play in Game 3 against Phoenix.
Yeah,
it was the team not letting him, rightfully so. You tear a meniscus in the same knee that you have the ACL. And by the way, were you gonna say, Will?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry to interject, but and let's not forget, he tore the ACL, stayed on the court, got on the plane to fly to the next Utah game. What do you want?
Yeah, when the media asked him about it after Game 4, he was like, "It's fine, it's fine." He didn't even want to talk about it. He just wanted to say it's fine. Yeah, and he flew with the team and played another possession after that. But one of the best, most encouraging things I think coming out of today's media day was regarding Kawhi and the health coming off the meniscus tear. Tomer Azarli asked him about the difference in rehab coming into this season as opposed to last season off of the ACL. And Kawhi, first of all, someone asked him about playing in Paris for Team USA next year. And he said
the Team USA questions.
Okay.
That was every media day, not just Clippers.
Yeah, it was insane.
But Kawhi said, I wanted to play this year, but I had prior obligations. It sounds like Kawhi's been 100% off the meniscus for maybe over 2 months now. It was a really quick recovery for him, because when he described it and the differences between that and the ACL, he was like, yeah, basically get the swelling out and then it's fine. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he made the point to say, at least I recovered quickly, something to that effect from the meniscus. It's not always like this, but for me it was. So I think that's huge for this team. Kawhi is coming in not just a month out. It sounds like a good 2 months out, because if he was planning on playing for Team USA, that team got together mid-July, end of July. And the only reason he didn't do it was because he would have had to leave midway through the tournament. So if he was comfortable enough to do that, I think that's a revelation. That's a big deal, because not everybody responds great to the meniscus injury.
That's a good call. And we talked about it last episode. There was that quote about, I think from Lawrence Frank, about Kawhi wanting to control everything. He's in full control going into this season. And he's had, like you mentioned, maybe 2 months of the famous, insane Kawhi workouts that happened in San Diego and things like that. He's been fully controlling those for months now. So you're right. It could not be better news heading into this training camp from the Kawhi perspective. I thought it was interesting. Paul George said he was 100% about 2 months after the season had ended.
I asked him this.
Adam asked him this. He said he wouldn't have been able to return to the Clippers had they made the finals. Didn't feel like anything super big there.
I think it is not being able to return if they made the finals. We were like, he could probably come back at least midway through a series against Denver with the workouts that we had seen on tape. And he was like, no, it wasn't going to happen. Even if they had made the finals, it wasn't going to happen. To me, that takes the sting out of last season a little bit, honestly, because even if Kawhi Leonard was healthy and they beat Phoenix, Paul George wasn't coming back against Denver. Therefore, they would have had no chance against the Denver Nuggets.
No chance.
The Clippers.
It would have been tough with both of them. Without Paul George, it would have been.
The Clippers' postseason performance is not like why I have a problem with last season.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point too. Which Paul George talked about. This, are you talking like the seriousness of the season and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Starting Moses Brown.
Lead us in. What a transition by Will. Wow. Toss in and out.
Paul George said, I don't like the question of us not taking the season serious, but the approach is to take practice serious. But to say we didn't take the season serious, we put everything to it. Says the Clippers need to practice more and have no regrets at the end of the season. So he didn't have an issue with it, but then he put a pretty solid reason why maybe that issue would be there in the first place. I hope they practice more too. This feels like a theme. Even when Doc was coach, they never got to practice. I don't even know what this means. I'm sure they're going to practice, but we don't know what the practices are. You know what I'm saying? Like,
partly what I think was missing from that quote was, I think he stressed that in games, we were going as hard as ever.
Totally.
Like we were playing as hard when we were out there, and he wanted to make that distinction. That it wasn't like they were dogging it during games in the regular season when they were available. I think that's kind of where he was coming from.
Yeah, that's fair. I hope the practices are more intense. I don't know. How do you make practice chill for NBA players? It seems like such a hard sport.
Well, Westbrook makes them more intense, apparently.
That's
it's a very different thing with Russell Westbrook at practice.
They just do an hour of zip zap zop or whatever.
Wait, are you talking about the zip zap route?
Yeah. No, the improv game.
Yeah, they're doing mind meld. Some other thing. What did we not like, I guess, before we go and do it? Was there anything we didn't like from this? Terrence hates NBA Twitter, which, hey, I agree with that.
You know what's funny about that, though? He emphasized this multiple times and said it was shit. And he's right. He's completely right. NBA culture on Twitter, or NBA Twitter, what the kids I think like to call it, depending on who you follow, you see a lot of nonsense. However, if the irony is, if there's one guy where he never gets degraded on Twitter, it's probably Terrence Mann. Like, it's always positive when it comes to Terrence Mann and how much more he should be playing. That's all you ever hear on Twitter. So it's kind of funny coming from, and obviously he's not on there to know that, I guess, or not on there much, but he also actually
name a social media platform that it's better on.
Yeah, yeah, true. Threads?
It's just
Marcus Morris putting heat out there. I don't know.
The NBA Twitter, though, is like the mecca of toxic NBA conversations, and
I think that's what Terrence is speaking to as well, right? Like, he's not talking about like, this is bad for me. He's not in the same position as like someone like Marcus Morris is.
I'm just saying it's funny coming from the guy that actually doesn't get dinged ever on Twitter. Like, he is so beloved. Everybody wants more Terrence Mann out there. Maybe we shouldn't trade Terrence Mann. Like, it's just funny. But he was great. He and Zubats were up there at the same time. And they had the great answer. Visa Zubats, it reminded me of his tone when he said in the locker room during last season, I think in the first couple of months when Kawhi was out, and he said the Clippers just can't have nice things. He was talking about injuries. But Big Zoo came out. I forget what the question was, but it was, what do you want to say to Clipper Nation? Something like that, with the letdowns the last couple of years. And they both kind of paused, and Zoo took it and said, quote, "We want to apologize for getting their hopes up and falling short every year. We're going to try again. I know it's been tough staying with us." And he it was almost, I don't want to say it was tongue in cheek, but it was like,
I think it's very real.
He's in on it. Like, he knows it's been frustrating, guys, but like, they are trying. They're trying, Jennifer. They're doing everything they can. It's just been so unlucky with injuries.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been funny if he was kind of making a joke, but I think he's totally sincere. These guys don't want to lose, right? It's like we talked about. Like, these guys don't want to lose like this every year. It's a damn nightmare.
I think this is a positive thing, though, coming from Zoo, because
absolutely.
I do feel like Zoo, as much as I love him and as great as he was, I do feel like he was kind of one of the victims of circumstance where last year, I at times there was a prevailing mood of like, oh shit, here we go again. And I think that people kind of checked out. And so I think this coming from Zoo, I'm hoping is self-prescriptive as well, as overall prescriptive. And once again, this isn't a knock on Zoo. I understand what happens when you ask your rotation core to continuously carry the burden of two superstars. Like the point blank, you like we have asked now for multiple seasons for the rotation cast to take the burden of two superstars plus their job. And I can understand how that manifests on the court, but I think that him saying this, I'm hoping there's a level of self-awareness with that.
You want self-aware Zoo?
Yeah, absolutely. Long hair, headband, doing yogi stuff. Like the Love Guru, but less problematic.
Way less problematic. One thing, I guess, Norm talked about wanting to be an all-star again. Like
I asked him that
every year. All right, Adam Oslin, our own. Jesus,
Adam, why don't you lead us in with this?
What the fuck, man? Was it Media Day or Adam Oslin Day?
Okay, it was weird. I don't normally ask this many questions because I feel like I'm a team employee. Obviously, I'm just going to be lobbing softballs. Leave it to the real journalists and the media people there who might ask a tough question. But not that many questions were being asked. So I was like, okay,
how many
Norm,
people were there turnout-wise?
Like 40-ish, I heard.
Yeah, it was probably in that range, but I don't know. It felt like only 25 maybe were sitting down. But the usuals were there, and they were asking questions. It just didn't seem like as many questions were being lobbed to guys. So Brian Seaman and I were just asking a lot of questions, sitting next to each other. And I asked Norm because coming into last season, he talked about wanting to be a starter and that being one of his goals and maybe being a sixth man. And I said, well, you had a great season still, the 42-point game against Phoenix. Do you have any individual goals coming into this year? And he said the one goal is still he thinks he can be an all-star. He can play at an all-star level. That will always be a goal of Norman Powell's, which was cool to hear. I think he's become a little bit underrated or a little bit overlooked. When we talk about the Clippers offseason and going into this season a lot, maybe it's because he's always in trade rumors, but we kind of discount Norman Powell and just how good and how efficient he was last season for the Clippers. He was pretty great.
It's just been availability. I think every time that Norm has been available, he's never far from the conversation of what's going right for the Clippers or what he's able to do in his role. But yeah, it's just his tenure here has kind of been a little bit marred by availability.
Is this the year he wins sixth man? Is this the year? Because that's what I want. I say, forget about the All-Star. That'd be great. Sixth man of the year. Bring it home, Norm.
He was up there next to Mason Plumlee. You guys will like this because I felt like Mason was getting left out of some questions. So it came back around and I said, Clipper Nation took a liking to you pretty early on. And you got all these nicknames, Plum Dog Millionaire, Point Plum, Big Plum, my personal favorite. Do you recognize how much Clipper Nation appreciates you? And he kind of smiled about that and took it all in. And he does love Clipper Nation. And that, that could have played a role in him coming back too. Like, don't forget, it's not just Russ who's on a very team-friendly deal. Mason Plumlee coming back for that price tag.
What's he making right now?
I thought he did. I don't know if it was a pay cut from last year, but I felt like the open market he could have gotten more. He
took a 1-year, $5 million deal.
That's not a lot for arguably the best backup center and a guy who was starting the first half of last season for Charlotte and playing some of his best basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he took a pay cut. I would be very surprised if he took a pay cut.
I think he'd get more than 1 year, $5 million.
I think $5 million is pretty low, dude. That's what's the vet min right now? Like 4.3, 4.5.
That's lower than the mid-level exception. That. $5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What would you pay Mason Plumlee?
I would have thought he could have gotten 2 years, $21 million, something like that from somebody.
Is it Steve Ballmer's money or my money?
It's Will Updike's money.
Oh,
1 year, $5 million.
Yeah, why not?
How about this? Vet men with a little more PTO.
Yeah, absolutely. Unlimited PTO. In season, out of season, who cares?
Out of season, no PTO. You got to be in the facility every day.
Well, I expect him to be at the facilities unless he's taking PTO, or it's his birthday, or something. I'm paying you, aren't I?
I want Will to own the team for 2 months. All right, coming up, we're going to talking kind of vibes in the season. The Russell Westbrook Vegas dinner, which sounded fun. And then Adam, who I think was at Media Day, got to meet the new Clippers play-by-play guy. We got all that and more coming up. We got ads, though. They've been loud. If that's the case for you, go ahead and turn it down. We got ads in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, we're back. We're talking Clippers Media Day affairs. We talked a little bit about some comments from Ty Lue, Kawhi, Terrence, all the regular players. And now we're talking a little bit about how we're feeling coming into the season. Chuck, why don't you lead us in?
I'm feeling, I think, maybe too optimistic is where I'm at.
I feel like Media Day has that effect.
It's all optimism. Because I'll tell you what, if you're pessimistic after Media Day, things are going probably horribly wrong for your team. But the Clippers are in a championship window. And, I mean, we heard the Rocco stuff. We heard the Terrence stuff. We heard the Zeus stuff. Like, I'm feeling pretty good. Adam, scale of 1 to 10, where are you at?
I'm at a Spinal Tap 11. I'm up there right now. I feel good about it. But everybody, hope springs eternal, a new season. Everybody feels like this early on. But the Clippers legitimately are starting to be somewhat overlooked, and they know that. There was a question to Batum about that too. They're flying under the radar.
Completely. They're not even in the conversation.
I think it's going to change, though, the first 3 weeks of the season because of their schedule. They're probably, if they're the team we think they are, they should get off to something like a 9-4, 10-3 start and immediately jump right back into being talked about as one of the contenders.
You think the Clippers start 10-3?
Have you seen their schedule to start the season? It's easily the softest part of their schedule.
They have a soft
They better start at least 9-4 or else they're in trouble because it gets way worse and the gauntlet happens by midway through November.
I mean, the first 4
and March, right? Like, isn't it?
Yeah, March we play 17 games, which is not ideal. One thing I did like is, so there was a story written by Andrew Greif about how Russ had a team training camp in Vegas, brought everyone there except for Batum and Zoo were out of the country. So I think they get a pass. Marcus Morris also not there, which seems like I don't know what he was doing. I don't have information about that, so I can't speak to the decision making of that. But it sounds like something that would have been nice to be at, considering it was, training. They got iPhones, which is cool. But it feels like a dinner that I would have liked Marcus Morris to be at. Also, shout out to Russ for being a great teammate. Am I reading too much into this?
No.
Yeah,
I don't think so at all. I think it's telling. I don't know. Maybe there's a good explanation for it, but it seems telling with the way it was worded too. 2 guys out of the country and Marcus Morris. It was just, I don't know what else to make of it. It seems like an awkward situation right now, considering he was traded. It was nixed. And this is somebody who people are pointing out now unfollowed the Clippers on Instagram. If you read into stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, if it happened recently, I think it's worth reading into. If like he was following them and then he didn't right after being traded. I mean, I could understand it from his perspective, I guess. But we all know if there's a trade that happens, Marcus Morris is the most likely guy to be involved, right?
I mean, yeah, he's literally like, yes, he's
salary wise, yes. In terms of a team getting anything back, no.
If the salaries work, you have to do the trade per the rules. But that was a great article.
I've heard that.
Seems like Russ is doing his thing to help the team coalesce, which we love.
I think his leadership is important. Like it can turn into a talking point or something that almost seems meaningless for a team that hasn't been able to come through the last 4 years, mostly because of injuries. But we've mentioned it before. Patrick Beverley had some of that on-court leadership and was a vocal leader for this team, and they have missed that. And now Russ coming into what we look at being a full season with the Clippers, that could do a lot for this team. I think having a team locked in at practice because one guy's going really hard is meaningful. Like I don't think you could overstate stuff like that because we talk about the seriousness of the regular season. If one guy is on the floor and Rico Hines runs on the hardwood diving for balls, what do you think he's doing at Clippers practices? And that inspires guys.
He's setting up people's
taking
iPhone.
a nap because he's too tired from the Rico Hines runs.
He's making sure they're getting their emails from their computer to their new phone. He's doing it all. No, we are happy that Russ is on this team. You know who is not on the team? Real quick, we know that Adam has prior engagement. I think another media day to get to. The Clippers will not be getting Drew Holiday. We can still maybe get Brogdon. And the guy who plays for the 76ers still wants to come to the Clippers, but there's
and didn't show up for his team's media day, though.
Right, which is like
Chuck did predict that accurately.
Let's move on from this man. We do not need this guy on the team. He's just, it's like, I don't know. I've never seen anyone watch a child throw a tantrum 3 times in a row and say, I wish that was my kid. I haven't seen it happen. Let's move on from it.
Woj said there were recent discussions, but zero traction between the Clippers and Philadelphia 76ers. That came out earlier today. Whatever that means, it is because Daryl Morey, I think, can be this stubborn because of their relationship, and he doesn't want to look like the guy that gave in to James Harden. Who knows how this is going to play out?
Oh, messy is how it's going to play out.
At one point, though, a few months ago, it seemed to look a lot more inevitable.
For one day, for about 8 hours, it sounded great. But yeah, and then the final thing, Adam, you met the new Clippers play-by-play guy.
Carlo Jimenez, great guy, fresh out of USC, brings a ton of energy. He actually got the first question at the presser before Jim Hill got it, which is crazy. I've never seen that happen before.
Said,
Jim Hill always gets the first question.
He said, is all this Chick-fil-A up for grabs?
Carlo's going to be great, though. I'm excited to work with him. It was fun hanging out with he and Brian Seaman all day at Media Day. You guys were missed.
Do we have any inkling as what his catchphrases might be at all? Anything that you
No, but we should get the exclusive and get him on Clips and Dip before anybody else does.
I'm down. Let's do it. Carlo, if you're listening, which you might not be, which, no, not going to hold it against you.
No, he says he's been listening to Clips and Dip. He says he's a listener.
Let's go.
How you like him now, Chuck?
That's great. Well, we'll have it on probably next week because there's nothing happening. Anything else we want to break down? The Clips play a first preseason game versus the Jazz in like 6 days, which is fun. Will, anything you want to send these Clipper faithful out with?
Nah, let's get out of here.
Adam, your words of positivity. We'll be back next week at some point, maybe with Carlo. Who knows? Pitch some new play-by-play phrases by him. Adam, what's your one uplifting thing to tell Clippers fans, other than that you asked some questions at Media Day?
It's not about me, guys, okay? I'm just a humble reporter at Media Day. No. It's the Kawhi news that he may have been 100% for over 2 months now, maybe longer. That's crazy to me that he thought about playing for Team USA. I would have thought, there's the likelihood that him coming off an injury, he'd entertain the thought of playing for Team USA, but apparently the cleanup was that quick and easy. So that's huge. He also looked noticeably leaner than he did last season at the podium with the Clippers. I took notice of that. I think Kawhi is going to hit the ground running. I hope this Clippers team is. I asked Batum about that too, because he was the one who said, it could take till December last season for us to really gel.
Right
I brought that up with him today. And he said, no, this team, he thinks because of the continuity and the carryover, this team could really get off to a hot start. So,
well, there we go. That's all we need to hear.
Here's to this team getting off.
What Will said, I guess.
Will.
Will, man, those 2 months that Will owns the team are going to be wild. Leave us a review over on iTunes. We really appreciate it. Check us out on YouTube over at Clippers Podcast on YouTube. We're at ClippersPod on Twitter. We will be back next week. And as always, let's go Clips.
Let's go.